everyone. Today I am back with Brother Mercurio, and today we are going to be talking about the crucifixion. It is the holiday. We are coming up on Easter, and this is an opportunity for us to kind of reflect on some of the things that have happened in our history. So, we're going to dive into some of the deeper meanings. You know how it is with me and Brother Mercurio. We like to look at the symbology and dive
We
into
do.
some of the bigger meanings of what does this mean, and also do some comparisons to other religions and cultures as to how they saw some of this stuff. So I'm excited to get this going for you. Let's get started. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, and happy Easter, by the way.
Yeah,
It's
thank
it's
you. Yeah.
yeah, it's come around quite fast, hasn't it? Seems like the year has gone so quickly since last year. But
You have
yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
Do you have any big plans for Easter?
No, I'm going to go and see a friend today for his birthday, and then I might go to one of the churches tomorrow to a ceremony and see what's happening there. But other than that, yeah, nothing major. I'm just going to relax a little because it's been a busy week last week. So
Now,
yeah,
don't
try
you
and do my own personal work, my meditations and things.
Yeah. Don't you have like a organization or something that you're like the head bishop of? That are you organizing
Indeed.
a ceremony for that?
Yeah, we're called the Order of the Rose of Sharon. So we may well meet online and do an online one because the members are worldwide. So
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know.
we may we may well do that. So yeah, we'll see. We might do something else. I don't know yet.
Oh,
It's
okay. Okay. Okay, well,
the
sounds
plans.
great.
But I'll
Yeah,
definitely be doing my own personal work and my meditation, which I think everyone can do. I think it's very important to also, as well as perhaps going to a more public community-based thing, but also to do your own inner work, because that's what transforms us, right? So
I think what would be really interesting is for everyone to do that exercise that you were teaching us a while back. Like where
the
you
compassion.
no, not that one, the one where you actually imagine yourself
Oh,
there.
oh yeah. Well, there's some great Christian meditation approaches, and one is called Lectio Divina, which is very much imagining yourself in the scenario in the Bible.
Mhm.
And we can absolutely we could run through that towards the end, perhaps, after a bit of discussion. Shall we
I
do
think
that? Yeah.
I think that would be great to actually kind
Yeah.
of jump into that at the very end and kind of like show people how they can kind of like put themselves in
Mm,
that. And if you understand
mm,
this is what I think is really important about doing an exercise like this is that
mm,
time runs simultaneously. So when you
mm,
put yourself in that state, you're kind of putting yourself in a timeless state so where you're able to actually engage in that and really
mm.
kind of step into that space and get a little bit more information as to
Mm.
what exactly happened.
Absolutely. No, it's very cool. And it's almost tapping into your soul and your kind of more unconscious understanding of those situations because they're all highly symbolic. And that speaks to your inner world, doesn't it? And so the only way to really apprehend that is to actually use meditation and visualization approaches to gain a fuller understanding and more of a gnosis around the situation. So
That's
yeah, I think it's really good to do things like that. Absolutely.
well, let's just dive
So
into the whole crucifixion. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I think that this. I was thinking this morning when I first messaged you about doing this, that it's actually a really symbolic and important story. And it depends. You may not be fully religious. You may not be into the whole, uh, the Christian understanding of it in the full sense. But even if you just look at the story of Jesus's life, death, and resurrection, there's so much you can learn from that. Just as an ordinary person. Um, if, for example, let's look at what happened. So just to run through the story, essentially, Jesus has this mission. He does his teachings, and then at some point he's arrested um, by the Roman authorities, and he's tortured, basically, and then crucified on a cross, which was their punishment in those days for for criminals or dissidents or terrorists or people who just generally didn't agree with the Roman regime. And there's obviously the whole story, and you can read the Bible, you can see the full story, or you can watch one of the movies. There's multiple movies around this, the resurrection of Christ and so on. So basically he dies on the cross. He has to carry the cross. He has to suffer lots of humiliation in public, and then he dies on the cross, and he's taken down again, placed in a tomb, and then on Sunday, allegedly, or it's during the Hebrew festival of Passover as well. On the third day of this happening, he rises from the tomb, and he's discovered by some of his disciples to be alive. He's died for sure. He's been buried, and then he's resurrected. So you've got those three things, life, death, resurrection. And in many mystical traditions, you can see that. There's lots of stories, around death and resurrection around the world. And it follows that theme, life, death, resurrection. It's almost those three things.
Well, if you think about, oh, sorry. If you think about, yeah, if you think about the term he uses when he says that you must be born again, excuse me, okay, that you must be born again. He's, to me, it kind of sounds almost like the resurrection. Like it's the symbology of raising from something that he was tormented from. Like we all go through torment. I mean, everybody I know, I was talking to a client the other day, and she was talking to me about finding healthy relationships. And I'm like, everybody's unhealthy. Like everybody's been through some kind of trauma, and everybody's had toxic relationships, and that you just don't find people unless they were raised, on in some sort of Montessori or something, that haven't experienced some kind of trauma. So when you're looking at what happened with Christ here, he was tormented. I mean, he was abused. He was going through some serious trauma, and then he rises from this. And when he talks about to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to be born again. If we just look at that from a very symbolic, it's rising from all of that, all the trauma that we go through, all of us. You mean I don't know, maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but I mean I'm kind of looking at symbologies, and I'm thinking, there's a lot of connections here.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? Like how many of us, we all probably go through life where we have little mini crucifixions, or we experience humiliation, or we experience, psychological difficulties and torture in situations, or we feel very, you're at work and your boss is down on you, you feel really bad about that, or whatever it is that you're going through in life, to quite serious things. Some people go through very serious trauma, don't they, with where the world is sort of pressing in on them. And we also go through positive things, obviously, just to balance it out. But I think that's Jesus's life story was, birth, death, and resurrection was a really great way to show the world, this is how to handle this. This is what the point of my story is that everyone goes through this. Everyone has trauma. Everyone has difficulties. The world that we live in, the Buddhists call it samsara. It's like this constant illusion where we're constantly being tested, and we're having to go through different scenarios in order to learn, and we grow and develop as we go through those. But then there comes a point in your development, especially when you're getting more into the spiritual side, I think, where you have realizations that actually I'm not part of this world. My soul, who is my true identity, is separate from all of these things that are around us and that are going on, and that I can overcome that. I can master that. In the Buddhist terminology, they call it satori. There's enlightenment, or Zen Buddhism. It's satori. So at some point, you can reach a stage where the world no longer has power over you. As it says in the Bible, St. Paul says, we know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. death no longer has dominion over him. And I think we can all reach a point where life no longer has dominion over us. You know, we can take everything. We realize that it's just part of the world. What the world does this, but we have power over ourselves, and therefore we no longer have to respond and react to the external world. I mean, it's difficult. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, you know, but at some point, I think there is a realization through meditation, through spiritual work, that you can do that.
Well, I
And
mean,
that, I think, is the message, you know.
yeah, absolutely. And if we look at the traditional Christian view,
Mm,
we're looking at Christ triumphed over sin and death
mm,
by being physically resurrected so that all who trust him are raised to a new life in
mm,
this world, to an everlasting life in the world to come. Now, I really
mm,
want to kind of like really kind of push this home a little bit because
mm.
there's a lot of cherry picking that happens a lot with Christianity.
Oh yeah.
They take this little piece and they don't take all these pieces. And one of the things that Pluto and I are going to be doing is really like digging into like the Hebrew
Mm,
and the Greek language. She's actually studying Greek
mm.
right now, and she's really pretty good.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she's really good. I have to say, I'm really quite impressed. Um, and yeah, so
Yeah.
she and I are going to be starting something where we're going to be really bringing forth some like hidden
Mm,
knowledge, and I think that
mm,
um, this, just kind of like introducing it a little bit and kind of talking about like we have a tendency of not understanding something in the Bible because there's some
mm.
contradictions that
Yeah.
Christians have a tendency of cherry picking. Well, I'll take this part and not this part because I
Mm,
can't deal with the contradictions. Well, the contradictions has to do with the fact that it's mistranslated. But where
yeah.
um where I'm,
Absolutely.
where I'm going with this is let's just break this down for a second. Christ triumphing over sin and death. Okay. So one of the things that he did through his lifetime was he was
Mm,
pushing there's another way. You don't
mm.
have to live
Yeah.
this way. And he would say things like, hey, don't be this way. You need to love people, love your neighbor as yourself. You
Mm,
need to, stop being so judgmental. Look at me.
mm.
I'm the son of God over here hanging out with sinners and prostitutes, and I'm washing their feet and putting oil on them. Like, hey, this is how you live
Right.
your life. Give your money to the poor. Like he's really preaching this um
Mm,
servitude to humanity, like be kind, be loving, share, live in
mm,
bliss. and
mm,
and and as he's moving along here, he starts every time he's bumping into people, that are like, hey, you're, go stone this person. He makes them aware,
mm,
hey, if you're without sin, you throw the first stone, and everybody walks away. and
mm.
but so he puts this into perspective that we're all sinners, okay? Because we're humans. Because we got the ape mentality, if you want to go back.
Oh, lower
We're
nature.
just
Yeah.
animals at nature, and so we're like, we're gonna go beat you over the head or shoot you with a gun or, get
Mm,
angry and whatever.
yeah. Some
But
more than others.
yeah, some more than
No, I'm
others.
joking.
But I think what
Yeah.
he tries to say is that you don't have to be that. You can evolve from it. And so he turns around and he says, be without sin, be like my Father up in heaven. And so he
Mm,
tells you, here's the example of where you need to be. So when
right.
and we're looking at the resurrection, Christ triumphing over sin. So he triumphed over sin by showing them, hey, I came in as a human being. So I have
Mm,
all the same DNA as you, but I did it, so you can too. And then
absolutely.
and then he triumphs over death. And the whole meaning
Mm,
behind of this was that, you can be raised through your life in this world.
mm,
And by mastering it in this world, you master it in the afterlife. It's kind of like that saying that we say in the Kabbalistic
mm,
tradition is as above, so below.
mm.
It's like master here,
Yeah.
you become the master of all things up there, you know. And
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really important that, that message that, you can also do this. You can also master your life, but it has to come from within. I mean, going back to your example of some of his teachings, around stoning others and other things, he says to the people, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, as you say. So it's telling them to look within. It's telling them to sort of look at their internal nature as sinners rather than externalize it and blame someone else. Actually, have a look at yourself first. There's like that other saying, isn't there? Like, take the plank out of your own eye before you criticize the mote in someone else's eye. I think that I've probably said it wrong, but it's the same thing. It's like saying he's saying that in all ways, if you want to become like me, then you have to change yourself. You can't change the world. You can't stop the world being negative or beating you up or whatever it is. But the one thing you can change is your own attitude towards it and your inner life. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you're the one choosing to love that person, that's your choice, and that's okay. You don't have to react and base your love or kindness on what someone else has done, because that's not you as a person. If you're a kind person, if you're trying to develop Christ-like qualities, then you can still act with that because it's coming from you, rather than just simply if someone shouts at you, you stop being compassionate and you return to the old ways of aggression. He's saying this is a new way. This is the way that you can resurrect yourself from the darkness of ignorance and of materialism, is by developing yourself internally and letting your soul shine through in your actions, rather than being reactive and allowing the world to crush you. It's not about the world. It's about actually yourself and your heart and your inner spirit.
Well, it takes awareness. You and I were having a conversation about awareness the other day, consciousness, about
Yeah, we
having
were.
conscious thoughts, and
Mm,
that's what it really kind of comes down to: not being a robot, not being
mm,
subjected to your rhythms and your patterns and your auto behavior, because
yeah.
the brain has a tendency of learning something and then following in this rhythm. So, I mean, a
Mm,
perfect example of that is if I throw you a ball without even thinking, your hand's going to go up in the air and you're going to catch
mm.
it, and you're not thinking about that. You're not going, oh, I need to
Right.
catch the ball. Your hand goes up.
Yeah, you just
It's an
yeah, you
auto,
just do it.
right, auto behavior. It's a rhythm that your brain learns. It learns how to go through these functions. And through
Mm,
our life, through each one of our traumas, we've learned how to respond to things that
mm,
trigger us in
yeah.
a very traumatic way, like flying off the handle
Yeah.
and getting upset and, quote unquote sinning. And so it's like we're
Yeah.
behaving in certain ways and we're falling into um
Mm,
what do you call it, like aggressive nature. And
mm,
we can um we can actually choose to be something different. We can choose,
mm,
like when we were talking about conscious
mm,
thought, right? And
mm,
that means being aware of that thought and creating that thought and choosing that thought.
mm,
And
yeah.
even Buddha said, be
Mm,
careful what you think, because those thoughts become words, and be careful what you say, because those words become actions,
yeah.
and be careful how you act, because those actions become your character. And
Yeah.
I hear clients of mine who say, I'm really a good person, I'm really a good person,
Mm,
I'm like, no, you're not, because your actions and your character is not showing, you know
mm.
a good person. Like when you go and
That's right.
key your boyfriend's car, that's not a good person.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of goes back to, our previous discussion around the three poisons, anger and ignorance are two of those three, and they tend to cause a lot of problems for people in their life because we don't know how to deal with it.
yeah,
And I think Christ is saying this is how to deal with it. Be aware of yourself. Look at it internally. Look at what you're doing, what your behaviors
yeah,
are. Yeah, I've got a great quote actually from a Hindu,
mhm,
well, a yogi, and
a
he's
yogi.
called Sri Guru. Yeah, he's a Western guy who went to India and was trained as a yogi, initiated into various tantric traditions and so on. And he's called Sri Gurudev Mahendranath. And he says, pause, meditate, take a new look at established customs, cultures, traditions, prevailing social cliches, and the external and evil brainwashing that goes on from the cradle to the grave. All these serve to block and impede our expansion and attainment. But we have to look within to find out why that is, don't we? We have to see what the blocks are to our own progress. We don't have to depend on the world. We don't have to constantly react to others and listen to or worry about what people think. That's where we get trapped, isn't it? Jesus didn't do that. He was the greatest rebel probably in history because he stood up against the Romans and he was constantly saying and repeating his message of love others, be kind to others, do good to other people, love your neighbor as yourself, love your Lord, your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. Mm-hmm. Despite, no matter what the authorities of the time, there were the Roman authorities and also the existing religious authorities of the time. That was the other group that was challenging him, wasn't it? But he continued to give his message and stand, and it took a lot of courage and a lot of bravery. And he continued right all the way through to the end, even though he was being tortured, even though he was being criticized and crucified and so on. There was the example of where one of his disciples cut the ear off a Roman soldier because they were angry with them arresting Jesus. And he healed the ear and put it back on again. There's so many, like he constantly lived as a person who was in touch with God. He was not influenced by the world. So I think that was, had a lot of compassion, but I think that's a clear message to all of us. The stronger you build your spirit in your heart, the more and more you can do that. You can be free.
And I really want to kind of drill this home because there's a lot of people that really get trapped in this thing. I was born a sinner. I'm a sinner. All I have to do is just ask for forgiveness, and it's like, somebody posted something like this in this group that I belong to, and I'm like, okay, so you asked for forgiveness, so why do you keep on sinning? Like, God washes away your sins. Okay, so why'd you go pick them back up again? Like,
right.
what's the point in going and taking a bath if you're not going to keep yourself clean? Like, like what, it doesn't make any sense. And so I kept on telling her, she's like, you need to repent. And I'm like, I don't have any sins to repent. She's like, everybody's a sinner. And I go, not me, and I'm like, that's all a choice. We can live our life and making choices that are conscious choices that are benefit to our spiritual growth and our connections to the people that we love. We can have healthy relationships and we can do really good things in the world. But all of these things are choices.
It's a choice.
You can choose to be a straight up bitch or a bick. Like you can be those things if you choose to be. I get challenged all the time by people that say or do things that can and should cause me to react a certain way, but I don't play into that,
Right.
Like, what is it going to harm me to say, okay, it's my fault? Like, I don't really care. Like, if that person needs an apology, then I'll give it to them. Like, they're not at the same level of consciousness that I'm in, so it doesn't really matter. Like, if that's what it's going to take for that person to
what have you got to lose? Once you get to a state of mind where you're not attached to things anymore, you can start doing that, can't you? It's possible to take responsibility and to just help someone else out because maybe he's not at the same level of awareness. And
and that's the thing that everybody, like when I'm working with some of my clients, the biggest thing is they want to be heard. They want people to agree with what they say. They want people to understand them, and understand means agree with me, because if you don't, you're basically saying I'm stupid. And that's the mentality that people have. And so it's I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right. And they stand in this, and it just keeps on. getting extra
mm,
pain. And then that's when quote unquote sin happens, because you start doing things to each other that becomes harmful and toxic just because you're angry,
mm, mm.
because you're not being heard. And I think that
Yeah,
a lot of what Jesus is saying is overcome these problems. Learn how
yeah,
to exercise love. You know, if
mm,
if you take a child, you've had children, right? And
mm,
you look at a child and you're trying to explain something to them. You're explaining something to them in a very soft and generous and kind, loving way. And when they
yeah,
screw up, you don't like get all like hateful. You just try to explain it to them, and
yeah,
if they don't understand, you just handle it.
exactly. Yeah,
And so when I think of you and I and some of our other brothers and sisters, we're in a higher level of consciousness to where we realize that we have a choice to be a better person.
mm,
We don't have to sin, and we don't.
yeah,
And
right,
but the world
absolutely.
doesn't understand that, and that's the part Jesus is trying to say is like, if you elevate yourself, if you strive to be like my Father, you won't have that sin.
Mm,
Otherwise, he wouldn't
yeah,
have said, sin no more, you know?
yeah,
I mean, anyway.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's getting yourself into that state, isn't it, where it's you feel okay with that, and you begin to understand the causes and consequences of what you're saying to others, and what it might do to them in the future. Like if you're horrible to a child, that can affect it for life. It depends. And I think it's the same with other adults. If you get yourself into situations where you start arguments, or you have to defend all of your actions against
Mhm,
someone, or you're caught up in this whole, what the Buddhists would call, one of the three poisons of ignorance.
mhm,
And it's because of that lack of awareness, you can have a long lasting effects on others. So as you're saying, if you start to talk to people with understanding and try and see that actually they're also suffering, they're in a difficult place too, and you don't know what's led them to the point where they're at, that's allowed them to be mean to you, or break your camera or whatever it is, or
mhm.
um,
Yeah.
lose your charger. It's like that's obviously meaningful to them, and so responding with compassion, or bodhicitta, as the Buddhists would say, is a way to free yourself. Actually, it's not like being a doormat. It's not like saying to them, I'm giving you license to abuse me again, but you're saying, I actually understand where you're at, so I'm not going to react to you in the same way that you did that, because I don't need to. I
Mhm,
can be free. I'm free to make my own choices and respond to you how I want. So I'm choosing now to use compassion as an example, so that you learn that it's also possible to do that, which I think is what Jesus is saying. We love your neighbor.
mhm. And this whole resurrection thing is about like realizing that you can be raised to
Mm,
a new life in this world. That means
mm,
you can be removed from sin. You don't have to make that choice. You can live the life just like Christ.
mm,
You can be like his Father. You can live a pure, more
mm.
wise life without doing things that's going to cause a really bad reaction. You know,
Yeah,
every action has a reaction, and if you think about that,
right.
it's not about. I always tell people, stop labeling it right or wrong. Look at it as,
Yeah,
what is going to be the reaction from me having to be right, or me having to prove something, or me having,
yeah,
throwing
yeah.
a temple, or breaking something, or screaming at somebody I love, or blaming them, or calling them names.
Mm,
What is the result from that? And everything has a reaction. And so when he's saying, hey,
mm,
I rose from that.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
you too can do that in this lifetime, and make a new
mm,
world for yourself in this world right here. And
yeah.
and the point is that when we get it right here, we get it right there,
Hmm.
as above, so
Right
below.
here and now.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think
And I think also, go on.
now I was just gonna say we drove that home real hard, didn't we?
I think we did, yeah, maybe a bit. Well, I hope it kind of makes sense to people out there, because the other thing about what you're saying is, you're when you are reactive and you respond in those ways, it can hurt other people, but also it hurts you, because even chemically, your brain is creating, creating hormones and other chemicals all the time. And if you're there's this research around this that shows if you're in an angry state all the time, you're creating chemicals in you that are harmful to your immune system.
Mhm.
Whereas if you keep yourself in a calm, happy state all the time, you're creating chemicals that boost your immune system. So it's not just about the other person, it's also about what's happening to you at the time when you're living in a state of anger constantly. It doesn't help, for example, or other, or a state of judging others, or a state, whatever your state is,
Well,
that's negative.
that's
Yeah.
interesting that you said that, because I was thinking about like how Jesus healed. Okay. And
Mm,
you think about this, these people are in a negative state. And when you're in a
mm,
negative state and you're producing these chemicals that actually cause physical harm to your body, you know,
mm,
too much cortisol can create all kinds of problems in your,
yeah.
right? And so, when you think about that, he's able to manage himself, but aside from that,
Mm,
he's a master of the elements and energy.
mm,
So like he can pull up that energy and transfer
mm,
that energy into somebody else so that it starts working in a
mm,
positive way. You know, I
yeah.
I just thought about that. I was thinking about like how he healed and what he did. But I mean, it's a real thing to do transferring energy.
Sure.
We do it when we get angry, you know,
Mm,
and the other person can feel it. Like when somebody
oh
gets
yeah.
at you, you can feel like your heart starts racing, my
Mm,
ears turn red, my chest turns red when somebody like throws that
mm,
at me. So
yeah.
Jesus has mastered the ability of being able
Mm,
to use emotional transference to push that energy into somebody else so they can have the energy of healing, you know?
yes. Yes. Absolutely.
The
And
same way that
even to the point.
Mhm.
Pardon?
No, I said the
Yeah.
same way people do with anger, just reversing it.
Well, right. How powerful is that if you can reverse that, and you can, as you say, you can turn that anger into compassion. You can also influence someone,
Mhm.
and he's a master of that, as you say. And I think the other thing is that we all have a Christ within us. We all have that potential to be compassionate, to be like Christ, or whatever you wish to call him. In Hinduism they call it the sleeping jiva. You've got that soul in you, that divine spark that can be resurrected and woken up. And once you do that, that takes command of your life, and that's what comes through and controls all of these things. So he's teaching people that. I think he's saying that at the moment you're living. One of the metaphors for a tomb is the human body. You're living in this sort of meat suit, for want of a better phrase. That some are very nice meat suits, but they're still a meat suit. Um, and that's sort of controlling you. And you've got with that, it's inbuilt reactive systems, fight or flight, and all of the other things that protect it. But there is a part of you, a spark of light, that can overcome that and actually start to change the way it reacts to the environment, because it's mastering it. And the internal inner you that is waking up is going to be Christ one day. You're going to become like that. So
Mhm.
if you maximize that and you start doing work that really, you know, first of all, giving you permission to be nice to others, because sometimes people are caught up in that pattern, aren't they? That they have to be reactive. But secondly, it's like maybe finding some spiritual path and approach that will allow you to grow that and develop it through meditation, or through prayer, or through devotional practices and other things that do start to awaken that. And then you'll find that your life changes, and you'll resurrect yourself. You no longer need the body in a way. I mean, the Buddhists always talk about being free from the wheel of birth and death. I think that's what's it. Once you've woken that up, that part of yourself, you can begin to cleanse out all of your past, karma or mistakes or sins or whatever you want to call it. And that part forgives you for all of that. And then you become resurrected. Jesus used to say to people, okay, I forgive you for your sins. Now go and sin no more. So you have to make that choice in yourself that you're going to do that. But once you do, yeah, it's very powerful, isn't it? And you can influence others. It starts to shine out from you, and you have a positive effect on the world around, instead of, as you said, anger or whatever that can cause a reaction in somebody. You start to generate light. That's what we call light. It's that light from the heart center of the being, that starts to have a compassionate and positive impact on people around you. And who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want to make the world a better place? That's also the metaphor for the rose on the cross. In the Rosicrucian tradition, we talk a lot about the rose blooming on the cross. That's what it is. Your inner Christ is shining forth, and it's mastering the elements, the four elements that make up the cross, in a very mystical, deep way. And the more you have that inner gnosis and that inner realization that you are actually Christ and your soul is what's driving things, then the world has less power over you.
Oh,
And
wow.
eventually you do resurrect. And as it says in Luke, Jesus says, Luke 24, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And just that sort of says that the more you believe in that inner spark, that God in you, the more you can overcome death. You can overcome this world of, because the world is all about change, isn't it? It's living, dying, resurrecting, living, dying, resurrecting all the time. There's always that going on around you. And you can either be drawn into that and be freaked out by it and, get involved in arguments, get involved in all of that whole process, or you can take a step back and you can start to realize that you're not dead, because you have this inner spark. And the more you realize it, the freer you get in your mind. None of that can touch you.
Wow.
So
I love it. I love
beautiful.
it. What about the power of the spirit over the material? What does that mean? What do you think it means?
I think that's the same thing, actually. It's this. Let's go back to the Rosicrucian metaphor of the rose on the cross of the elements. So the idea is that the cross represents the four elements of matter: earth, air, fire, and water. And then in the middle is a rose, which represents spirit. And so as the spirit grows, as the rose grows and flourishes, it starts to overtake the four elements. The four elements are still there and they're all around us, and the cross is actually also a symbol of balance. But the more our rose blooms on the cross, usually from the heart center or Tiferet on the tree of life, that's how they often explain it, the more the spirit has command over those elements. So that's what we're working towards. We're all moving towards that state. And I think it's just human evolution. I don't think it's tied to one religion or another or one particular mystical path. I think there's always a stage where somebody meets the cross and they realize, okay, how do I master this? And then the next realization is usually, okay, I have to sacrifice something. I have to sacrifice myself on the cross, myself being the lower self, the lower nature and the habits and the behaviors and all the things that you've lived with all your life. You've grown up from childhood with all this kind of brainwash in a way, which people have, given to you to survive. But at some point you realize, actually, I've got to do this. I have to take responsibility. I have to actually master my own elements. And so you sacrifice yourself on the cross of matter. You sacrifice your lower nature and your all of these habits and behaviors. And once you do that, then your spirit can shine through, and then you master the elements. That spirit has to rise, and that's what masters the elements. It's not your brain and your intellect trying to control everything, because that's a whole different thing. Then you turn into a control freak. What you're doing is you're almost like letting go more and more, and you're no longer allowing, sacrificing yourself means basically sacrificing reactivity, sacrificing ignorance, sacrificing those things through letting them go. Those no longer need to be your survival mechanisms and your survival kit. Actually, if you start to rely on God in you, as we call it, or your divine inner self or your spirit, someone once said to me in the past that when you die, your soul goes to heaven, right? And then another person said to me, who's a medium, I think, actually, you are the soul. Your body dies. and you go to heaven. You see the subtle difference there, which I and that at that point I realized this actually is you. You're the one in control. It's not that you have a spirit that floats about and then it disappears. You're not the body, you know. You're not your thoughts. You're not your reactivity and your programming. You're actually the one in charge of it. And once you have that realization, your inner Christ rises and you do resurrect. You become a different person, you know.
You know, it's interesting. You said something that just kind of like sparked something inside of me that I was thinking of,
Mm,
dying and going to heaven kind of thing. Um,
mm,
and Jesus is really kind of like try to bring home that thing of, this
mm,
rebirth, this being, born of the spirit and, cleansing yourself, so that you can be in that state. Well, like if you
mm,
talk to like mediums or people that channel or anybody who talks to dead spirits or, they're psychics and, all of that kind of stuff, or even people who've had near death experiences, you're going to hear a lot of the same stories of
mm,
and what has seems to be a cumulative um, consensus is that in the state of mind that we are when we die is the state of mind that we are
mm,
outside of our body. So if you're you're not going to all of a sudden like be made perfect. And I think that that's part of the reason why
mm,
Jesus was like saying, hey, get it right in this lifetime, like purify yourself, rebirth yourself, be born of the spirit.
mm,
Means like, cleanse all the negativity outside of you so that when
mm,
you are there, you know, you can go straight to this euphoric
mm,
space versus the place that you maybe hold up for a little while.
mm.
There was this really good book that I read about somebody who had a near death experience, and they said that the this angel was taken home to the different levels of hell and the different levels of heaven,
Oh
and
wow!
and one of the levels of hell was a person who was a drunk alcoholic throughout his lifetime.
Right.
Um, and he actually got saved and believed that Jesus was going to forgive his sins, but because he's a sinner, he can keep on being an alcoholic. So he didn't change anything. Okay.
Oh okay.
Just quote unquote got saved. So he had the ticket to heaven, but he didn't get that ticket to heaven. What ended up happening is that he found himself in a repeated pattern of being at a bar, trying to drink and not being able to pick up the drink. And so he's like trying to do this whole time,
Mm,
forced into this reliving his pain over and over and over and over again. And the person who was having near death experiences said, why is God letting this happen to this person, and he's like,
mm,
God's not letting it happen to anybody, he's choosing this. And he said all he
yeah.
has to do is look up. And so the girl looked up and there was all these angels above him. And so like salvation
Wow.
is right there for you no matter what, right? You
Yeah.
have the opportunity to change every day of your life. And so like a theme that I like to live by is every day I wake up and I choose to be better than I was yesterday.
Mm.
Just and even if it's just a microscopic,
Just a small thing like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
tiny little bit. It's like today is better than yesterday. And
Yeah.
and slowly but surely you start climbing that mountain, you know?
Absolutely. Mm.
And
Wow.
yeah, so I kind of like I think about this, and you can't take things that people have
Mm.
experienced, um,
Yeah.
real life scenarios
Mm.
where people have literally had these near death experiences, and I
Mm.
mean, I've had experiences that there's just no way. Like I've had
Yeah.
people like say to me, how can you be sure that there's a God? And I said, well, I can
Mm.
understand somebody asking that question that's never had any proof. But in my life, I've had so
Mm,
many things happen to me that there's no way that I can say it's not true. And you know,
absolutely.
yeah, it's like but
Mm.
anyway, I forget why I even said that. Anyway,
No, but you're right.
yeah, but
There's
oh
a
yeah,
Bible
but you
quote.
can't take into the consideration. I know why now. Sorry, you
Oh
can't
yeah,
disregard so many people are having the same experience. If so many
true.
people are having the same experience, and I personally have had certain experiences that I
Mm,
would never disregard. I mean, like, how much more proof do
yeah,
I have to prove that this is real, right? And so for me,
yeah.
it's like if all these people have literally been to heaven and the same thing keeps on happening, where people are,
Mm,
regardless of what religion they are, what belief they have, or what
yeah,
rituals they went through that their religion taught them that they had to do or say, or,
yeah.
whatever, it all comes down to what kind of person are you truly?
Mm, mm,
And how did it show up in your life when you lived? And that
yeah,
was the message Jesus said. I mean, that was his
yeah.
whole, you know,
It
it's,
just shows, doesn't it, that human evolution is universal. There's lots of universal stages
mm,
like that, exactly like that. That we come across, like death and resurrection. That happens for everyone. These are key things that where you can have realizations that evolve you. It doesn't have to be a particular religion, as you say.
mm,
There's a force in us that's like Christ, and we can always tap into that when we choose to, and it allows us to resurrect, basically, as long as we're willing to sacrifice our ego and our lower nature on the cross of the matter, or the four elements. Then we can rise. There's a great exercise people can do out there, actually, which I learned from a guy called Christopher West. He promotes theology of the body, which is an amazing, and it's a whole nother episode we could do on that. But basically, Pope John Paul, who was a very deep spiritual man, wrote this whole treatise called The Theology of the Body. And it's saying that the body gives us signs and points us to ways that we can, reunite with God. And it goes into lots of very deep material on that. So Christopher West, obviously that's in theological language. So Christopher West actually translated that into understandable English. And it talks about love, it talks about sex, it talks about, how romance is just like the love God has for you on a smaller scale. So if you start to experience love, you'll know what, that points you to what the potential is to have that divine union, which is, again, we can go into that in another way, the sun and the moon and the alchemical union, alchemical wedding and so on. But the point I was coming on to after all of that, which I've just forgotten. So let me cut this bit.
but I know, both of us have been doing that today. Yeah, you'll remember
Yeah,
it.
basically. Okay, so yeah, what I was going to say is this exercise that I learned from Christopher West is that if you're feeling very upset, um, if you've experienced some kind of trauma, some sort of difficulty, and you're feeling really upset, and you can feel that pain, that emotional pain, which is like Christ felt on the cross. He probably went through all of those things: physical pain, emotional pain, trauma, and all of that. One of the things you can do is just stand still, put your arms into a cross shape, hold your arms out, visualize yourself with all your pain, just allow it to be there as if you were with Christ on the cross, that you're also being crucified through that. And weirdly, that transforms it. It's unbelievable. I've used that a few times myself when I've had difficult situations or been upset, and it just by accepting, the fact that you are in pain and putting yourself into that shape and, seeing yourself as being crucified, something lifts, it changes. Your inner Christ rises and somehow transforms
Well, it's
that.
also
So
like you're also
people can do
opening
that.
yourself up. If you think about it, like
Mm,
there's closing off and then there's opening up, you
yeah.
know. I was actually given something that I shared with Pluto, and she and I were kind of doing it, and this kind of is in the same like reference of what
Mm,
we're talking about it opening up and all that
mm,
needed to happen. And I was
yeah.
like, if you look at, when you pray, Like, here, do this with me because I want you to see the difference. Put your hands together,
Okay.
pray. Put your thumbs together like that. And,
Hmm.
and what do? What's your automatic response when you're about to pray? You close your eyes, right?
Usually close your eyes, you feel calm. Yeah.
But
All right.
what happens with your head? You're about to pray.
You bow.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So
Mm.
so now I want you to think about this. Now, what if you turned it upside down?
Mm.
What what automatically happens? Your head goes up. You look, I just saw I was focused
Mm.
on myself and I noticed, what are you doing? Your head goes up.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
And so, like, what are you doing? You're this right here is
Mm.
blocking
You're.
off this energy that has to do with some of the negative things that go on in our body. If you think about the chakras, your root
Mm.
chakra
Mm.
and your solar plex and your sacral chakra has to do, a
Mm.
lot of that has to do with like stability and stress and pain and frustration
Mm.
in the world and stuff like that, right? So, and then your heart chakra could be like either love or heartache. So it could be
Mm.
negative or positive. So now you're blocking that off. You're even blocking off your throat. And you're like on
Yeah.
your left is your third eye and your crown chakra. So you're over here and you're praying and you're delivering it into the most powerful chakras
Mm.
that can really purify you. And then you go like this and you open up
Mm.
and all of it just comes down totally pure and rushes into you. And it's like what you said, it's like you become open and you're allowing
Yeah.
yourself to really like be flooded with that pure
That
energy.
light.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Mm.
actually, I received that when I was doing some work with Aphrodite, and
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Mm.
she was, goddess of love, So she, so she's, so she's like,
Wow.
let me show you this, and and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Well,
amazing how like just little things like opening, going from
mm.
this to this,
Mm.
of shifting it, just flipping the hands, flipping the triangle upside down and seeing what happens when you flip it. So like if you can use that as the same
Yeah.
thing, like with the resurrection, and you think about like the
Mm.
meaning behind this is flipping
Mm.
everything inside of you, like changing, opening yourself up to
Mm.
what if there was a possibility that you could be free of all this pain,
Mm. There we go.
you know? That possibility exists, but you can't
Mm.
experience it until you acknowledge that that possibility is there.
Right. You can't, because the other thing is to block the pain down, and it's still there. You haven't gotten rid of it. So the only way is to open yourself up, allow yourself to experience that pain, because it's actually not going to kill you. It's not. It's not going to be as hard as you think, because you let that emotional rush of the pain come through and flow through you, and then it's released, which is
Well,
much better than holding it in, right?
right. When you hold it in, you cause all kinds of blockages, and you can even cause energetic blockages that can cause
Yeah.
physical pain.
Physical. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's a lot in the body, really, isn't there? And in the Hindu tradition, they use mudras. They talk about all these mudras and like putting your hand like this or like this, and they do that for the same purpose, because each physical movement causes a change in your energy, or it allows you to receive something, or whatever it happens to be. I'm not an expert on mudras, but there's a lot on the internet around that you can Google. But there is a lot in the use of the body, for sure. And I think sacrificing yourself on the cross of matter involves that. It involves you giving up certain things about your body that, and ways of thinking that cause you problems. So yeah, I firmly believe that I'm not the body. I firmly believe my body's like a vehicle. It's a car I drive. And I am a spirit. I'm actually a spirit living in a body. And I am a spirit is number one, not the body. The body's there. It's great. It's a useful vehicle. I can interact with others with it. But actually, I am a spirit. And once you start living with that realization, you do start to almost I'm not saying I'm resurrected, but you almost start to feel differently. You feel like you have control over your life and your body, and you can start directing it more. It's no longer automatic that you just accept what the body does. you can start to master it, and as you say, change your hand positions, or do things that will enhance your spirituality.
Mhm.
So I think it's a very important distinction to understand that you are really not the body. That's just part of the elements in the world around you. You're not really even the mind, because you have so many automatic thoughts and things, don't you, as you said at the beginning.
Right.
So at some point, you can use a whole range of techniques, or go to your hypnotherapist,
Go to
and
a
you'll
hypnotherapist.
find ways to free yourself. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
yeah.
it's just programs, that's all. And I think that I think when it comes down to it, if we can just realize that we are not
Mm,
human beings trying to have a spiritual experience, we are
yeah.
spiritual beings having a human experience. And there's really, if you think about that and you really break it down, like if I was a spiritual being trying to have a dog experience,
Mm,
I would be like sniffing other dogs' butts, you know?
right. You would.
That's what my dog does. You know,
Yeah.
that's how he determines, like, what kind of dog are you? Sniffing trying to, you know,
Yeah, and in a sense, we do that, don't we? Yeah, the human, if we're allowed to just follow our instincts and that lower part of our nature, we are effectively doing stuff like that. We're on that level, aren't we?
yeah. But even dogs evolve, okay? And you start
Mm,
noticing that some of them have a harder time, and some of them are, they evolve. They've been incarnated through the animal kingdom multiple times, and like one of my
mm.
dogs, he's gotten to what I would call a higher level of consciousness, and he doesn't. I call him the Zen dog of the animal kingdom, because he's another dog will be all like aggressive and barking at him, and he's just like, and he turns his head, and he doesn't have to engage in that, and
Mm,
it's a higher level of consciousness. So I look at it like this, no matter what you are, you might be sniffing butts, but
yeah.
you're you're eventually learning to raise your consciousness. You don't have to engage, and just like him, he's learned that he doesn't have to engage with these aggressive animals. And there's going to be other human beings on the world, in our world,
Mm,
that are going to be very aggressive, and we don't have to engage in that aggressive behavior. That's a lower level of consciousness.
right. Mm, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
And so I'm just kind of trying to look and see, like, do you feel like that we've covered everything? I mean, like, what about the
Yeah.
victory of escaping the world, and not realizing that that's not.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? It's what we're saying, really. The more you have that realization that you are a spirit over matter,
Mhm.
that you do escape. You might be still living in the world, but it's no longer affecting you in the same way. It's no longer, triggering you, or you're no longer reacting to all of these kind of things that you used to react to when you were younger. It's like you start to free yourself. You can still live in the world, but you become free in your mind. And you start making choices that, I want to react like this. I want to actually be compassionate to this person, even if when I was younger, they would have annoyed the hell out of me. Nowadays I can see where their pain is, and I realize that actually it's much more productive for me to react in a compassionate way, to give them love back. Even if they hate me, you can just return it with love, because you're doing two things. You're, number one, you're detaching that constant pattern of interaction, your karmic response and theirs as well. And number two, you're generating compassion in yourself, in your heart, by doing that.
Mhm.
So that's only benefiting you and making nice chemicals and so on for yourself.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So it's a
definitely.
dual thing. Mm. And that's
That's
what
such
enables you to keep doing it.
that's a wonderful point. It really is. It's a
Mm,
wonderful point, because, like, when we behave compassionate to others, and we're working towards healing at somebody else by being that way, we're also healing ourselves
mm,
in return. I mean, that's such a
yeah.
beautiful statement that you just said, that by healing others, we're healing ourselves.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Hmm.
Isn't that the message?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that, kind of a really good takeaway from this is that, you know, this resurrection is a symbology. And it really doesn't matter.
Mm,
You can sit here and take it all literally. Oh, he really died on the cross and he really did rise from the dead. And okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, this isn't a debate. This isn't an argument.
mm,
Um, did he rise or did he not rise? It's
mm,
Let's say he did rise and he actually did this. It still comes down to a symbology of what,
mm,
think about it. The 3 days. It took 3 days. What is it? And you've got the Trinity. Three is a number that's really strong in the Bible. Why didn't it take 7 days? Why didn't it take 8 days, 10 days? No, it took three because
mm,
three is the number of the Trinity. There's
mm,
a lot of things that happen, and regardless of what your
mm,
faith is, or you're atheist or Christian or whatever.
mm.
I mean, um, the point
Puts
is
a lot in there.
that there's a
Mm,
lot packed in, and God doesn't make mistakes here. He does things for a reason. These things
mm,
happen in a certain way, in a certain order, so that there's this extra symbology wrapped onto that current that needs to be infused into us so that we can,
mm,
and remember that at any point we can be resurrected. We can rise from the ashes. We can be like the phoenix. We can be
mm.
like Christ. We can come out of the torment, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So do we
Wow.
do that little exercise
Um,
you were talking about?
yeah, let's do that. So with this, Lectio Divina means basically going into the scene that's before you. So if you want to do this with us out there, anyone listening or watching, just close your eyes for a moment and visualize yourself, if you're good at visualization. See yourself walking in the street with Jesus as he's carrying that cross. So you're in the crowd, you can start to smell the smells of the crowd. It's a marketplace nearby, you can smell fruit and vegetables in the distance. You might hear the sounds of people screaming and shouting as the group of people carrying crosses are being taken through that street. And as you look at it, you see Jesus standing there holding this cross on his shoulder, like this really heavy cross, and he's bowed over with the weight of it. Keep that in your mind, in your visualization. And as you follow him, he goes through the streets, and you can hear the shouting and the screaming. And he's taken up, dragging this cross up to the hill, the top of a hill, where you can see other crosses have been placed, and other people are, have been crucified by the Romans, hanging on these crosses. And when he gets there, he's allowed to drop the cross onto the ground, which he probably does with a sense of exhaustion. The cross is lying on there, and then the Romans tear off the clothes that he was given. Earlier, Pontius Pilate, the judge, had put a purple cloak on him and hung a sign around his neck which said "King of the Jews," or INRI. So those are taken off by the soldiers. Jesus is lying on the floor, exhausted, and they cast lots. They kind of say, "Oh, who wants his coat? How much would he give me for that?" And then they gamble a little and see who wins it. And they then nail him to the cross. They place him on the cross and visualize this poor man being stuck on the cross. His body's on there. His arms have been forcibly stretched out to the edges of the cross bar, and there's a soldier nailing, like literally taking these huge nails and nailing them in, and you can see the pain on his face. He's already bleeding from having been whipped, and he's been mocked and criticized by many people in the streets. He's exhausted. Then they put his feet together at the bottom of the cross, and they nail them onto the cross as well. And then finally, still in all this pain, he's lifted up. And the weight of the body is quite strong, so as he pulls against these nails, it's painful. You can almost feel that you're present there with him. And then he's placed in the, he's the cross is lifted up, and he's up there looking down on the people below. And his mother comes along, and other um, his sister and his disciples. The Romans are still there, and now freeze that scene. And now you can go up to each of these individuals and ask them what they're doing, what they're feeling. Ask Jesus, what are you feeling? And try and understand that. And then you go up to one of the soldiers and say, what are you feeling? And see what sort of impression you get back. And then maybe go to Mary, his mother, and say, Mary, what are you feeling? And she's tearful and crying at the foot of the cross. And then go to some of the onlookers and say to them, what are you thinking about? And just for a moment, let yourself understand the immensity of this scene. Like, what does it mean? What is it? It's almost like the body's being nailed on there as a way of fixing it. We're fixing the volatile onto the cross of matter. What realizations can you get from that? By looking at this cross shape, looking at the blood coming down, looking at the crown of thorns that's on Jesus' head, that's digging into his brow as the blood streams down as well. This is all the body, this is all the material stuff. And very soon, he's about to quit this material stuff. So let the scene continue. And now you see him up there, and the sky goes dark, and the lightning flashes and thunder. And he says those words, why have you forsaken me, Lord? And the lightning flashes, and then he says, unto you I commit my soul. And you suddenly see the body goes limp. There's nothing in it. And there's a light that rises up into the heavens from the body. And the soldiers who've been breaking the legs of the other people come to Jesus and realize that actually he's dead. He's passed and he's gone. Freeze that moment again, and now ask everybody in the scene. Ask the soldiers, what are you doing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Look at the lifeless body. Look at his mother crying at the base. Ask her, what does she feel? And obviously, you can take more time over this if you wish. And then allow the scene to dissolve and bring yourself back into reality. The body's going to be taken down. It's going to be taken now to the tomb. You could continue it if you wish to follow the whole story, but it's quite a lot for someone to hold, I think, with visualization sometimes.
Wow.
But that's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's powerful, isn't it?
I did it. And, and it's really interesting because I was thinking about like all the people yelling and screaming and, and it just made me think about the sheep mentality of how some people in our day and age, with all of our technology and all our wisdom at the core of our being, we haven't changed. We still, we still go, they did the gladiators and all that kind of stuff, and people would die and people cheer and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, we still we still watch boxing and MMA fighting and, and all, and football games and, and all these things where like people are so aggressive and we're screaming and yelling and like we're still doing and the updated version of cheering for somebody else to be the victor of something. And when I looked at the soldiers, what I saw was regret. Like I saw them, like one person, I thought like when he died, it was like this overwhelming feeling of, oh man, I'm gonna be punished for this, or I'm gonna go to hell for this, like the pain and the suffering of his family, the crying and the, not understanding why, all of that, I think this is a really, really great experience. Like what have you experienced when you've done this? Have you like
Yeah, I mean, it's similar feelings, like asking each person, you understand the pain and suffering they're going through, reflected from what's happening to Jesus on the cross, and um, where's he going from here? There's a great sort of sense. I found there was a great sense of like, well, what next? He's gone. You know, this light, this person who was in the world that was actually causing some change and you know changing people's hearts and minds has gone. How's that going to continue? And obviously, we know the story that continues, but and Christianity is one, the biggest religion in the world still, I think. But it's incredible to sort of visualize yourself there at the scene and try to see what happens, and how that affects you as a person, and start to understand your own reactions. What do I feel like if I was nailed on the cross? What is if people are like the Romans are casting lots for the clothes? Actually, that made me realize partly that the body is really nothing. It's just like a set of clothes that we wear that people can cast lots for. So actually, the most important thing is the spirit, and God basically helps Jesus to raise himself up and out of the body, and eventually he decides, right, I'm quitting the body now. I'm going back to my Father in heaven. Mm-hmm. And
wow.
Where's the real Jesus? Where is Jesus? It's not the body. And of course, people mourn the physical world because the physical world and the body is very significant to us for some time, and it's taught us a lot. We've got used to it. So when it dies, like if you think of other people who've died that it's painful to lose that presence and that sort of thing that you're used to, familiarity. But after a while, you can realize that actually that's just part of the world as well. He's quit the world now. He's left his suit behind, his spacesuit, his human suit, and he's now back in heaven, in a heavenly state on the other world. But he can come back and visit. So he does. Christ resurrects and he shows everybody actually it's not the end. You might leave one body, but you move on into the other world. And so those are the sorts of realizations I was having from doing it, was following that train through. And obviously I've done the other scenes as well. In fact, quite a few scenes in the Bible. You can take any scene really and do that. But it's a good one.
Yeah, it's really quite the amazing thing to do. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. That was
of course,
interesting to do. Listen, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this, really kind of diving into the meaning of the resurrection. And, our goal is to inform you, to help you think from a deeper level, to help you raise your consciousness, to bring, ways of helping you grow spiritually. And
can I leave one message?
Absolutely.
I think the one thing I'd like to say to everyone is try to think of yourself as a spirit who happens to have a body, and see how that changes your thinking. That's all I'll say. But I wish you all a very happy Easter.
A spirit that has a body.
You are a spirit.
Yeah. Spiritual journey, spiritual being having a physical experience. And I think that when you look at it like experience, you're not locked into it,
Right.
It's just a blip in time and that we're doing. It's just something that we go through to help ourselves evolve. And the only way that we can actually learn is through doing. So we have to take that route. And what better way to actually really understand love is to overcome our own stuff so that we can actually experience love from the truest point. Thank you so much, Brother Mecurio, for joining me today. It's always fun doing conversations with you. And we will see you very soon. Have a wonderful Easter, you guys.